Good morning. Today is Friday, May 22nd, and I'm Pastor Terry from Tuscola United Methodist Church. I'm so glad that you have joined us here today for our daily devotion, and we are going to continue on with the 10 Commandments. Today is day 5, and this is a study. I want to make sure, I don't think I said his name yesterday, and so I want to make sure I tell you that this study is by Kevin DeYoung, and a great study. He's got a book out about this, which is a really interesting book if you ever are looking for something new to read. So today's commandment is you should honor your father and mother. So I'm going to read that to you directly, which is very simple in the Bible. It is simply honor your father and your mother so that your days may be long in the land the Lord your God is giving to you. Okay, so what does this commandment mean? Well, at face value, of course, it means that you should honor your parents. There are actually scriptures that tell what you should do if your children do not honor you, including one in Deuteronomy 21, verses 18 through 21, that tells parents, if your children are constantly disobeying you, you should stone them to death. Now, my recommendation is that you do not try this. I think that this kind of goes very much against the cultural norms of the day, and there really isn't a lot of evidence that that was actually done. Sometimes the Bible gives us these huge hyperbolic moments and says this is what kind of thing happens to people who don't listen to their parents. Think about some of our stories, our fairy tales. Little Red Riding Hood, you go off into the woods by yourself and you're going to get eaten by a wolf. Hansel and Gretel, you don't stay home and starve to death meekly and quietly, and a witch is going to eat you. So it's along those same lines. So just remember that as you go through this. Please don't actually consider stoning your children to death. However, what if you don't have parents who are alive anymore? Does this mean that you're off the hook on this one, that you've only got to worry about 9 commandments? Well, as in a lot of these commandments, the commandment is larger than just what it's about. Very often these commandments are about something much broader than what they are stated on. And so Christians recognize that this 5th commandment is not only about your parents, about your mother and your father. It's about something much deeper. Now, that being said, I do hope that if your parents are living, that you do show them honor. Whether or not you have a good relationship with them, that does not mean that you must put up with abuses. However, there are ways that we can honor those who brought us into the world and show them respect, even if we don't agree with them on everything. However, as I said before, this commandment goes much deeper. The New Testament gives us a lot of instances in which we should obey those who are in authority over us. Some of these examples are a little uncomfortable because of the time in which they were written, such as the New Testament tells slaves that they should obey their masters. Well, that doesn't sit well with us today, and that's okay because it shouldn't sit well with us today. But what we can use to translate into that is that employees should obey your employers, that we should honor them even when we don't agree with them. My direct employee is the United Methodist Church as a whole. There are times I disagree with what they do. However, I honor the offices of the district superintendent, I honor the offices of the bishop, and I honor the cabinet of the United Methodist Church and the body of the annual conference. Even if I don't agree with everything that they say or do, I'm choosing to work for this group, and therefore I give them my honor and respect. Another one that doesn't sit well with us, but it goes to illustrate this further, is wives submitting to your husbands. Obviously, I'm not a huge believer in that today. I believe that relationships are partnerships and should be equal. However, in the time that this was written, males were considered the head of the household. Some that do continue on to this day. Hebrews 13:7 says to obey the leaders in the church and submit to them. 1 Peter 5:5 says that younger men ought to be subject to the elders. Romans 13 tells us that we should be subject to governing authorities. Titus 1:1 says to be submissive to rulers and authorities, obedient for every good work. And 1 Peter 2:17 tells us to fear God and to honor the king. Well, sometimes we don't like who's running our country or our state or our county, and we say, well, they just don't know what they're talking about. We've got somebody in here who's a real godless person. Remember who was in charge of them at the time. They were actually being persecuted by their government, and yet still they are told, obey the authorities, be submissive to rulers. That's really hard for us to hear because as Americans, we pride ourselves on free thinking and freedom of speech. And that doesn't mean that we can't disagree, but it does mean that we need to do it in a way that is respectful. Our power comes through our ability to vote. That's where we have our power. But I will tell you this, even when our governor and our president disagree, which is most of the time, I include both of them in my prayers every day. So let's move on just one more layer of this. Going back to the fact that what if you don't have parents who are alive, or what if you didn't know who your parents were? There are other ways that you can honor people around you. Perhaps for you, you can honor those in the body of Christ who are maybe your elders, or maybe they're not your elders, but they are people who have more knowledge than you on something, or they're people who simply need a little bit of extra care. I know that if my parents were sick or injured or hurt, I would do just about anything to be there for them. But that doesn't let me off the hook when other Christians in my church family are sick or hurt. I honor God by honoring those among me who need that extra care in the same way that I would honor my parents. So that today is the fifth commandment. Next week, we'll get into some of the, I feel like that the commandments kind of gradually filter down. So we'll get into some of the tighter ones and some of the ones that, we might see affecting our day-to-day life even a little bit more. I look forward to going through that with you, and God bless you, and I will see you on Sunday for worship. Bye-bye.